Well, when we first started, it really was a pure volunteers effort. So at that time in 1992, we were like 7 years in existence. It was started by volunteers and it really didn't have staff. But we felt very strongly that there were women who needed help and who could not get immediate support, and they didn't know where to go, and we wanted to provide a very easy way for women to get help. That's how the helpline started, and it was just, it was Claire Chung, the president then, who started it. She was inspired and had been trained by Samaritans of Singapore. So we actually took a leaf from that. But we felt like, it shouldn't just be a helpline. We needed more than a helpline for suicide, right? Which was what Samaritans was about. And also important to have a very safe space that women felt comfortable to call. So by women, for women helpline was what was conceived. So now today, it's much more professionalized, right? So we have a much larger staff, and so we started with having one staff. Now we have a team of staff, and while we still depend highly on volunteers, and I think that's one of the, I would say, the beauty of this helpline is that it really is. It feels like a community effort. It's still very much that, and the staff are to support the volunteers. So either the staff fill in the gaps. So there are times when volunteers cannot do it, cannot actually take the calls. Our staff will be there. Also, it's tough work, right? And, for volunteers who are not professionals in this area, they always have staff to fall back on when they have a difficult call, an unusual situation, or a call that has stressed them out themselves a lot, right? So they need to debrief, decompress.
Yeah. But, at the start, how do you actually put the number out there so that these women who don't seem to know where to go for help actually know about this helpline?
Right. I think it really takes time. What we do find is that very much word of mouth, right? So we can put, of course, you have the helpline, and with the internet, you just put, help, like people will call for divorce or some sort of emotional distress. And they will find our helpline quite easily. But knowing the number and knowing it exists is one thing, but will you call this helpline? You will call this helpline when your friend says, hey, I think you should call AWARE, right? I've used them, or I've heard that they're very good. They help my, sister, blah, blah, blah. So it's very much the community that is saying, call, you might need some professional help. I, as your friend or your family member, I can only do so much, but I think that it would be good if you could call this helpline. It's interesting because it's actually, there are differences in like the type of calls we get, and the nature of this helpline to people in communities. So before COVID, we had a high percentage of calls, over 30%, that were to do with marital relationships. Many people asking about, how do I get divorced? It's not working out. I'm feeling really unhappy in this. Sometimes there was abuse as well, right? And then COVID, that dropped to about 20%. And other calls rose, for example, family violence rose. So people didn't call so much about divorce, but they called about emotional stress, and they called about abuse and violence. We saw a huge spike in family violence cases during the lockdown, right? It was over 100% increase. So the evolution of the helpline, one is, I think what it will always remain is that it is going to be, and still is, the simplest way of getting to speak to someone and to get immediate help, right? You don't have to walk into an office. You can be completely anonymous if you want. You don't have to give us your actual name. Whatever information you want to give us is fine, identifying information. It's only when we need to call you back that we need some of your personal data, like your phone number or your email address. But otherwise, you pick up the phone. Of course, you might have to call, more than once in order to get through. So one of the things that we have been managing all this time is how do we make sure that we pick up as many calls as possible, right? Knowing that when people want help, they are really quite stressed and they would like to speak to someone immediately, and not being able to get through might add to the stress, but we just tell people just call again. And second or third time you usually get through. So we then also evolved by introducing IT, right? So during COVID, we introduced a chat, right? Because some people we knew were experiencing family violence, but they were at home. And now they couldn't call because there was no safe time to call. And so they would actually make appointments on chat where they knew they could have some time, at least with their laptop or the computer, and they could type with us. So that's how we supported people during COVID, right? And I think we have seen email and chats are new. It's still not the majority. Most people still call and prefer to call. I think younger people like to chat. So we have moved according to the demands of the market, right? So that's what we hope to remain, always to be that first port of call. We may not be able to give you, for example, we don't give financial subsidies or support, but we know where to refer you to, right? So if you just need to have that immediate, friendly, safe, very empathetic response with information to be provided, then you can, I think that the Women's Helpline is a great place to call. The other thing is legal clinics and counseling are also services that people will call us for through the helpline to make their appointments for counseling. And our counseling services are very affordable, right? It's actually not so cheap to get private counseling, but our counseling services are very good and very affordable.
Do you receive calls from men where the women are the perpetrators?
We receive calls from men mainly to help, to support their loved ones who need help. And they call us to say, how can I help? What can I do? How can I get my partner, my sister, my mother to call you? Things like that. So I think people know AWARE well enough. I think we stand for something which is like a very pro women, really supportive of women brand. So we hardly get any calls from men who are, saying that they are being abused. There are family service centers. The National Anti-Violence Helpline is now up. And those would be obvious places that men would call. So it's not an area where men don't have help, which is why we didn't feel that we needed to expand it. However, when it came to sexual assault, and this is an area that really requires specialized expertise, we did feel that there was no clear avenue and service for men. And that is one area where we actually do support men who are victims of sexual violence, right? And also all genders who are survivors of sexual violence. But certainly I have come across people both who want to do the helpline, as well as people who want to volunteer, who want to donate, who want to be a member, who have said, I've been helped. That's why I want to give back in some way, but not necessarily through the helpline. But there are those that actually have felt that they are suitable for the helpline. We are also quite strict with our helpline recruitment. So, it is a very sensitive service. We have to choose people with the right aptitude. And just because you care a lot about this area and you've been helped, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will be a suitable helpliner. right? Because a helpliner has to be really quite neutral but empathetic. Neutral in that I'm not going to be telling you what to do. It's your life, and I can't impose what I would do in this situation on you, right? And some people who have gone through very intense experiences may find that difficult to do, right? To like, okay, detach themselves from their own experience and identity and be able to just empathize with the person on the line and to really listen, without their own story going on in their own heads, right? To that person's experience and to hear the emotions and then to be able to respond appropriately, right? So if you're still dealing with your own story, it can be quite hard to actually be a good helpliner. And these are the things that we screen for. These are the things, our recruitment process is very robust. It has got many levels. And we really, because of that process, find that the people who do come through are suitable as well as very committed. We have put in place a lot more support than we used to. And that is actually one of the differences, right? That the helpliners who are volunteers get a lot of support. And now this support has had to change over the years because before COVID, and this is again how COVID has changed our practice, we used to have everyone come into the office. And so you would have the helpliners in a room where they can see the staff because it's a glass wall, and they could actually wave to staff, and the staff were there. And when people were taking their turns, they would be on standby to help any helpliner. But COVID changed that. People could not come to our office. We knew that this was really a time of crisis for Singapore, and we needed to have our helplines up more than ever. So we very quickly, and thankfully we had the foresight before COVID to move into internet phones. So when COVID happened, in 1 week, we became remote. And all the helpliners who had been coming in and who had received, they were experienced, they could take the calls now from home. Then we needed to ensure that we could provide the remote support for them to take the calls from home, right? So that actually helped us to increase the number of helpliners, because then people could take a break from work, do the helpline for the 2 hours, take a rest, and then go back to work if they needed to, right? So in fact, COVID was quite helpful in allowing us to expand our services, but we needed to make sure that all our helpliners from where they were had the support that they needed in order to provide this service well.